Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 8th webinar on a treatise on cosmic fire. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress. All episodes of this, the Secret Teachings of All Ages and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube, a really easy way to catch back episodes. You just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. And you can register for any of the other webinars on the homepage of moriafederation.com. All right. So during our last session, we took a look at the last subsection of chapter 2 called the Prana of Forms, where we learned that atomic and molecular matter, the building blocks of the higher kingdoms in nature, are animated by the energy of Brahma. That's this symbol here and this descent. The third logos. The subhuman kingdoms are animated by the second and third logos, and that only the human and the higher Deva kingdoms are animated by all three logi. We also learned more about surface radiation and that there are two classes of lesser Devas who receive these emanations. The higher of the two classes receiving from the human kingdom and the lesser group from the plant and animal kingdom. This chart outlining 4 groups of devas and 5 kingdoms of nature shows the path of emanation and reception of prana that we've learned so far anyway. The section ended with a paean to fire, listing no less than 26 of its attributes. We then began a new chapter called The Function of the Etheric Body, which is divided into subsections on the receiver, assimilator, and transmitter of prana, and ending with a section called The Disorders of the Etheric Body. In the first section, we learned about the pranic triangle and the fact that the etheric web is actually, quote, the component parts of one interlacing fine cord. We ended last session with a look at the 3 fates, prompted by, quote, the silver cord is loosed, as the Bible expresses it, and this is the basis of the legend of the fateful sisters who cuts the thread of life with the dreaded shears. And this brings us up to the present. So if we could get a reader, please, start us off.
Yep. Janet, would you like to read?
Sure. Just let me know if I'm not loud enough. I didn't have time to test. Etheric web is composed of the intricate weaving of this vitalized cord. And apart from the 7 centers within the web, which correspond to the sacred centers, and of which the spleen is frequently counted as one. It has the 2 above mentioned, which make with the spleen a triangle of activity. The etheric web of the solar system is of analogous nature and likewise has its 3 receptive centers for cosmic prana. The mysterious band in the heavens, which we call the Milky Way, is closely connected with the cosmic prana, or that cosmic vitality or nourishment which vitalizes the solar etheric system.
Thank you. Okay, so first up, the etheric web is composed of the intricate weaving of this vitalized cord. and apart from the 7 centers within the web, which correspond to the sacred centers, and of which the spleen is frequently counted as one, it has the 2 above mentioned, which make with the spleen a triangle of activity. So there's a lot in this little passage. So the spleen is usually counted as the 8th center, not as one of the 7. But interestingly, he includes that here as one of the 7. The weavings of the vitalized cord connect the various chakras, which he's calling centers, with every other part of the etheric web, for it is an unsegmented cord. The statement, the 7 centers within the web, which correspond to the sacred centers, seems to make a distinction between 2 sets of 7 centers, which we normally think of as one group of 7, suggesting that the 7 centers within the web are the form aspect of the 7 sacred centers. This seems to be confirmed by this quote from Light on the Soul, which lists specific qualities for each of the centers. Could we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, you want to read?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, I'm Veronica. Could you read, please?
Yes. 6. Certain of the qualities of the sun are the qualities of the centers. A. Quality of the solar plexus, warmth. B. Quality of center at base of spine, kundalini fire. C. Quality of the ajna center between the eyebrows, illuminating light. D. Quality of the head center, cold light. E. Quality of the sacral center, moisture. F. Quality of the throat center, red light. G. Quality of the heart center, radiant or magnetic light.
So we can see from this list that these are qualities that aren't inherent to etheric matter, which is what the etheric body is made up of, and the etheric centers. That those etheric centers, those 7 etheric chakras in the etheric body, hold the actual sacred centers, whose qualities are listed here. And we'll get a further confirmation of that in a reading in a bit. Okay, next up, the etheric web of the solar system is of an analogous nature and likewise has its 3 receptive centers for cosmic prana. Since we know that the 7 sacred planets are the 7 major chakras of the solar system, we might surmise that 3 additional, probably minor planets form its pranic triangle. Remember, we're talking about the solar system, not the sun, which has its own pranic triangle of centers. How awesome it would be to actually see the solar systemic etheric web, which would encompass the entire solar system. Next up, the mysterious band in the heavens, which we call the Milky Way, is closely connected with cosmic prana, or that cosmic vitality or nourishment which vitalizes the solar etheric system. The statement raises a number of questions. The Milky Way is, of course, made up of the stars of the galaxy to which our solar system belongs. Actually, I read an article recently that said that actually our sun belongs to a a galaxy that is colliding with the Milky Way, the Sagittarian Gallery, something like that. But it's generally considered to be part of the galaxy called the Milky Way. Astronomers estimate that there are between 100 and 400 billion stars in the Milky Way. So as a teeny insignificant member star of this galaxy, are we fed by prana emanating from the whole galaxy? That is to say, is there a field of prana that permeates the whole galaxy? Or are there certain solar systems that act as a source for us of this prana? In esoteric astrology, DK speaks of the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. Could there be an additional 3 minor solar systems that are the pranic triangle for these 3 major systems? And finally, are there cosmic pranic devas that focus cosmic prana into our solar system in the same way that these golden hued devas focus solar energy into our planet? Until telescopes allowed us to see the individual stars of our galaxy, it was thought to be a kind of cosmic cloud. That's what you see when you look up in the sky, right? Hence the name, the Milky Way. It's easy to imagine this seemingly amorphous stream as a source of cosmic prana. Any thoughts about this or questions? Anytime you have any thoughts or questions, just raise your hand. Okay.
I think Anne Veronica has a question about the centers. The throat center is blue, but it says red light.
Right. That's interesting, isn't it? And a lot of these assignations, and the one that comes to mind specifically is that, generally speaking, and every illustration will tell you that the heart center is green, the solar plexus is golden. If you do a web search for the centers, every illustration, that's what it'll give you. But DK tells us that actually the reverse is true, that the heart center is, and it's a transitional thing. As you move the energy from the solar plexus to the heart, the color shifts, and the heart center becomes golden. So so we can't necessarily depend on the description. Let's get back there to where was that? Yeah, you can't necessarily depend on these colors as describers of the centers. Yeah, let's see what I can say beyond that. Looks like this is the only one that indicates a color. And it doesn't even necessarily, indicate a controversy here, that it could be a one color center that emanates a red light. But who's to say? Like I said, these are not necessarily the, and I know for a fact that these two are reversed according to DK's teaching. So, anyone else?
Yeah, Robert.
Hi, Francis, when you said that about, wouldn't it be cool to see the solar etheric centers, brings up a really interesting question, because, when I picture, DK talks about the development of etheric vision, and somehow I always consider that like a local thing, but obviously one would probably see a wide range in the development of etheric vision of the immediate environment, and, would it be limited to the range that the normal eyes could see? Would there be amplification of it by instruments? Anyway, it's just kind of
Right.
really interesting thought there.
Yeah, it's, and this is, we just don't know because he doesn't talk
Right.
about this. But, I would imagine that just like, and all vision starts in close and gradually expands. A baby's vision is only a foot or two distant, and this has more to do with consciousness than the actual organs of perception of the eyes themselves. You limit your own ring pass not of vision based on your consciousness, right? And I would imagine that would also happen when etheric vision came on, that you would probably start in close and only gradually develop the ability to see beyond the planet's surface. But hey, even within the planet's ring pass not, it would be an astonishing ability to have.
Yeah, it would be great. And you wonder, would that be seen at the same time as you're seeing the physical, the conventional physical vision? Would that be obliterated by it? Anyway, it's all speculation, but it's a really interesting subject.
Yeah, would it be like changing radio stations? One
Yeah.
would shift out and you would see the other. It's yeah. Obviously, we don't have too many accounts on that. I think I'm going to be introducing the work of A.E. Powell here, and I imagine in his book he would called The Etheric Double, that he might describe the experiences of, at least his own experience of etheric vision, because he couldn't have written the book without having it.
Actually, his books are a compendium of quotes from primarily Besant and Ledbetter and some stuff from Blavatsky. So he wasn't an experiencer. He was just this kind of a.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Well, then it'd be interesting to know just what material I'm quoting, because I didn't look past that fact. Thanks, Robert. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Hi.
Yvonne.
Hey, Yvonne.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Since the physical body is built upon the etheric blueprint, from what I understand, we would see them both at the same time. And as you have mentioned, you're born with this. It's a development of consciousness. As our consciousness increases, so will our vision. And you see these simultaneously, since the etheric body is the blueprint of the physical body, and this is when you would see everything that's going on in the yeah.
Well, that seems a strong possibility because they're literally intermeshed. They're not, the etheric body doesn't hover outside the physical body like we think of, like what you see illustrations all the time of these progressive cloud-like bodies around the physical. The etheric body is literally part and parcel within and intermingled with the physical. So it would seem that way. But it's also possible that you would have to attune to like another visual frequency in order to see it, and no telling what that effect. And it could be that you could train yourself to embrace the vision of both simultaneously, which would be much more useful because you could make correlations. DK says that the actual visual equipment is already there. We don't have to get into a new root race body in order to see etherically, that our current fifth root race eyes have the ability to see on etheric levels, but that it's our consciousness that blocks that vision, which I found to be really fascinating. It shows how subjective our interface between our senses and our consciousness is. Anyone else?
Some comments. NASA says quality of is perhaps not equal to, you will perceive such and such color when you observe it.
Hmm.
Or when you observe.
Well, oh yeah. Going back to this, right? Here, yeah, quality. Where's that? Quality of the throat center red light. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I can't do much more with that than, to say that your observation is indeed possible, that 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 the quality doesn't necessarily translate as a visual fact, that it could have the quality of what red light has, you know. Yeah, good point.
And then
It's very esoteric. Yeah.
Jerry makes a statement. Could the red light of the throat center be related to the first ray, as the throat center's purpose is to manifest the purpose of the self through the crown center?
Yeah, you're always going to have that correlation. Whenever it's a hardwired correlation. When red, of course, red can also be a sixth ray color, and it can be negative aspects of a sixth ray. Certain, he calls them lurid reds, lurid greens, that can be negative aspects of a ray. I find first ray red is the most problematic of all the colors in terms of like representing them. When I do it, I try to make it a darker red, because there's a quality of passion to a bright red that is much more sixth ray than first ray. It tends to really underscore form life, rather than suggests the unseen, or the formless like the first ray does. So, I think it's a problematic color. In fact, DK says somewhere that the true color of the red of the first ray is not seen in this universe. So, suggesting that it won't be till the next universe that our eyes can actually see that red. So you see how subjective this whole topic becomes. There's a fabulous section on color in Letters of Occult Meditation, if you're particularly interested, where he just, and you think, oh, it'd be easy, just talk about colors, right? It's quite a challenging section. Okay, anybody else?
That's it.
Okay.
No, wait, Karen.
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, just I wanted to mention different clairvoyants see and describe the energy field differently. For Barbara Brennan, who wrote the book Hands of Light and had a school of healing, it describes it differently than Dora Kuntz, they're both clairvoyant.
Uh-huh.
Dora Kuntz was one of the co-developers of therapeutic touch, and Dora Kuntz was tutored by Leadbeater. When she was young. And so, that's always been interesting to me in studying these different things. Well, what's really the truth? I don't know that we will actually know that, but also, different books like Powell and, the Theosophists tend to be somewhat consistent, but that's been one of the challenges in studying the energy field.
I would imagine, yeah. Ultimately it's going to be only your own experience, or for me anyway, what DK tells us when he tells us some specific fact, but he doesn't go into the material we're talking about much at all. That quote I gave you about the qualities of the centers is one of the few where he actually describes them more specifically, but yeah, Yeah, good observation, Karen. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yvonne.
Yes, Yvonne?
Yeah, doesn't Gray have a book, all the pictures of people with the etheric body?
Yeah, Alex Gray.
Yeah.
He's, I don't know how accurate he is. He's, art serves a different purpose than what you might call accurate illustration. He comes from a background of illustrating medical charts. You can tell that by looking at his work. That's what they look like. But then with this added layers of the spiritual vision, And as to the actually, since I don't have etheric vision, I can't say. I know that it's incredibly stimulating, spiritually. I mean, vibrationally stimulating, especially certain of his pieces. They just really have a potency to them. But this is going to affect you according to your ray type too, to whether you respond to Gray's work. But to look at it like you would look at Gray's Anatomy, for instance, interesting that they both have that title, which is kind of where, he bases his images on that kind of medical illustrations. It's interesting to compare them and to see what he does with them. Yeah, anyone else?
Just Maria says that DK says that you can see that red sometimes flash at sunset.
Oh, you mean, oh, right. Well, that's a different, it's an unseen red is what you're talking about, that red light, that red flash. I'm not sure that it's specifically associated with this throat center red, but I remember that quote. It's a fascinating quote. It's like you get this little brief glimpse into the unseen worlds as the sun sets. Anyone else? Okay.
No one else.
Okay, let's get a reader for this new section. Section 2, called the Assimilator of Prana.
Judy.
Sure. The assimilator of prana. The process of assimilation is carried on in this triangle, and the prana which enters into etheric center circulates 3 times around the triangle before being transmitted to all parts of the etheric vehicle, and from thence to the dense physical body. The main organ of assimilation is the spleen, the etheric center, and the dense physical organ. The vital essence from the sun is passed into the etheric spleen and is there subjected to a process of intensification or devitalization according to the condition, healthy or not, of that organ. If the man is in a healthy state, the emanation received will be augmented by his own individual vibration, and its rate of vibration will be keyed up before it is passed on into the physical spleen, or it will be slowed down and lowered if the man is in a poor condition of health.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, first up. The process of assimilation is carried on in this triangle. He's talking about the pranic triangle, which is the center between the shoulder blades, the one slightly above the diaphragm, and the spleen itself. Carried on in this triangle, and the prana which enters into either center, any one of the centers, circulates 3 times around the triangle before being transmitted to all parts of the etheric vehicle, and from thence to the dense physical vehicle, physical body. So triangles are the fundamental geometry for circulation, especially unseen or esoteric circulation. And we often find, as in this pranic triangle, that the number 9 is instrumental in the circulatory process. It's a number of completion, and in conjunction with the threefold, suggest a completion of the process, right? So it may have to do with with the idea that each center has a threefold process involved with it. You know, he doesn't get specific here. And notice also that the pranic triangle is used for both reception and distribution. Be interesting to know exactly what happens to the prana with each circulation of the triangle. This will probably eventually be ascertained by physicians in the not so distant future. Next, the main organ of assimilation is the spleen, the etheric center, and the dense physical organ. So the main organ of assimilation is the spleen, but the main organ for the reception of prana is the center between the shoulder blades. They seem to represent a kind of polar opposition of reception and assimilation. And then you have that third center, which is the least robust in modern man, which is the one somewhere just above the diaphragm. We've talked about this idea in previous sessions. But what's new here is this threefold circulation. And next, the vital essence from the sun is passed into the etheric spleen and is there subjected to a process of intensification or devitalization according to the condition, healthy or not, of that organ. So a healthy spleen intensifies the vibration of the received vital solar essence, whereas an unhealthy splenic center subjects this vital essence to a process of devitalization. At first glance, the latter seems puzzling, for we might presume that an unhealthy etheric slash physical body could be revitalized by a stronger pranic stream. But possibly the devas concerned with this process recognize that an excess of prana, which is after all a form of fire, could not be productively assimilated by an unhealthy organism and would thus only serve to more quickly deteriorate a person's condition. And we'll discover later in the reading that more is not always better when it comes to prana. Rather, what seems to be optimal is a balanced input, which is determined by the health of the physical body. Any thoughts or questions about this? Just raise your hand. This last sentence amplifies what we just read. If the man is in a healthy state, the emanation received will be augmented by his own individual vibration, and its rate of vibration will be keyed up before it is passed on into the physical spleen, or it will be slowed down and lowered if the man is in a poor condition of health. So I think it's a summary statement. Okay, next up. Can we get a reader, please? Now we turn in the corner into some interesting and new information here. Reader, please.
Yeah, Karen.
These three centers are in the form that all centers take, of saucer-like depressions, resembling somewhat the appearance of small whirlpools, and which draw within their sphere of influence the currents that come their way. The center should be pictured as whirling vortices with a closely woven threefold channel passing from each center to the other and forming an almost separate circulatory system. This finds its point of departure for the entire system at the further side of the spleen to that which the prana entered. The vital fluid circulates through and between these three centers 3 times before it finally passes out from them to the periphery of its little system. This final circulation carries the prana via the fine interlacing channels to every part of the body, which becomes entirely impregnated by these emanations, if it might be so expressed.
All right. So first, these 3 centers, we talk about the pranic triangle, are in the form that all centers take of saucer-like depressions, resembling somewhat the appearance of small whirlpools, and which draw within their sphere of influence the currents that come their way. So not only are these centers radiatory, but they also draw prana in towards their own central points. A bit later in TCF, DK once again describes the chakras as whirlpools. Let's, if we could get a reader for this, please.
Yeah. Yeah. Heike.
We must disabuse our minds of the idea that these centers are physical things. They are whirlpools of force that swirl etheric, astral, and mental matter into activity of some kind. Because the action is rotary, the result produced in matter is a circular effect that can be seen by the clairvoyant as fiery wheels.
Thank you, Heike. DK's first statement confirms what we read earlier, namely that the 7 centers in the web act as the form aspect of the actual non-substantive chakras. Actually, I'm drawing that conclusion from this phrase where he says the 7 centers within the web correspond to the sacred centers rather than are the sacred centers, right? And we get that again here, this idea that he says they're not physical, right? Well, the etheric web is physical. It's etheric, but it's physical, right? Suggesting that, they house the centers rather than are the centers. So next up, the centers should be pictured as whirling vortices with a closely woven threefold channel passing from each center to the other and forming an almost separate circulatory system. The centers here described are, of course, the 3 pranic centers. In his book, The Etheric Double, A.E. Powell goes into greater detail and illustrates this process of pranic assimilation. So I just want to caution you, this is Powell, not DK, but I found it very fascinating, even if not necessarily correct in every detail, as we can assume when we read DK. But I think it's worth a read. Could we get a reader, please?
Daryl. Oh, before we read, Tom had his hand up.
Yeah. Yes, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a bit slow, but concerning the issue about if the spleen is in poor condition,
Yes.
and then it receives prana. To be precise, it doesn't. I read it so that it doesn't mean that the organism would get in poorer condition just because the spleen is not okay, the prana would heal it anyhow, but not in that amount that it would geometrically increase the radiation. Did I understand it right, or how do you see it?
Oh, well, let's see. As I understand it, and you have to speculate based on what you read with TK. In my understanding, there's an optimal point, and it's not a more is better situation. So, if the and I have to preface this with another question, which is, does the etheric body also run down or come into poor condition, or is it just the physical that does this? That's another thing that's not directly addressed. But at any condition, we could assume that if the physical body is in poor shape, the physical spleen is probably equally in poor shape, just in terms of general health, unless there's some specific problem like heart problems or whatever. And so the question then becomes, well, if the pranic input is increased, which in other parts of his writing he describes as a tonic, right? As a way of increasing the health, wouldn't it, in fact, increase the health of the body? But what seems to be the case is that the body is literally unable to process the prana, and therefore more prana would perhaps, and this is something I'm just surmising, would perhaps have the reverse effect. In fact, later in the writing, he indicates that people in climates where they get too much sun and are exposed to too much sun, because they don't have the science of how to repel prana, actually become quite lethargic as a result of this exposure to prana. So, in this different theater of, the physical health of the person, possibly the same thing is going on, that it's the spleen repels the prana in order to keep prana that would otherwise be harmful to the failing health.
Yeah, I think so. So to that, it might be that you can interpret it in two ways. So it might collapse the system, but also because I'm a little bit fluish today, so I will anyhow go to nature tomorrow, and I in that believe that even though my spleen wouldn't be 100% healthy, I think that the more prana I get will make it better than worse.
I agree with you, and I think it's the difference between having the flu and being in a generally unhealthy state, overall, like that your body is, as happens in old age, for instance, that you become less vital in general,
Yeah.
But when you in that case, I think, but even then, I know it seems like at cross purposes, like, if the spleen isn't giving you the prana that you if more prana would be better for you, why doesn't the spleen deliver that prana to you? That becomes an open question with this. But I think in general, when there's general poor health, that the Davic entities involved in this process recognize that it actually could be harmful for you. But get out there in the sunshine, and I hope
I will report if I get weaker.
yeah, no, I doubt you will. I have a feeling it'll be quite a tonic thing, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I saw Robert's hand flash up there a minute. Robert, did you have something?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The in that same quote, I think it was that you mentioned about the Westerners in the Eastern climates where they can't handle the heat. I think it's there that he refers to what happens to the etheric body. It becomes unstrung like a loose tennis racket.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is very vivid and gives a real description of a dysfunctional etheric body and why things wouldn't, circulate properly, be received, be transmitted. Not because, that's the system doing that, but because that's the state of the system.
Yeah, it really all points to the fact that there is an optimal degree of prana rather than more is better,
Right. And
And
there's kind of like an analogy there with a vitamin, that if you,
right.
you can take too many vitamins are really good for us, but you can take too much of them.
You can literally poison yourself with vitamins, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
With certain vitamins, not all of them, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. Anyone else? Okay, let's read this section from Powell's book. Can we get a reader?
Yeah. Joe.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. The vitality globules are first drawn into the spleen center. Then they are broken up into 7 component atoms, each atom charged with one of the 7 varieties of prana. These atoms are then caught up by the rotating secondary forces and spun round the chakra. The 7 different kinds of prana are colored thus: violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, dark red, and rose red. It will be observed that the divisions are not exactly those to which we are accustomed in the solar spectrum, but resemble rather the arrangement of colors seen on higher levels in the causal, mental, and astral bodies. The indigo spectrum is divided between the violet and blue rays of prana, whilst the red of the spectrum is split up into dark red and rose red prana. Although there are 7 distinct kinds of prana, there are only 5 main streams, as described in some Indian books, because after issuing from the spleen chakram, the blue and violet join into one stream, and the orange and dark red join into another stream. The streams leave the spleen center horizontally.
Thank you, Joe. Fascinating, huh?
Indeed.
I mean, it just makes you want to shift over and read the whole book because it's so colorfully written, literally colorfully written. Of course, we have to remember this is Powell, not DK. And so, but, again, whether it's right in every detail or not, we get a taste of the complexity of this subject of pranic assimilation and distribution, because whether this is exactly right or not, there certainly is a process that is of this level of complexity involved, right? Okay, next up. This finds its point of departure for the entire system at the further side of the spleen to that which the prana entered. This is the exit point for the pranic triangle. 3 times around, then through the etheric spleen into at its exit point into the physical spleen to there be distributed throughout the body. Powell's illustration, if accurate, gives us a more detailed picture of the exit points, assuming the point in the center of the diagram to be the, quote, far side of the spleen. And if it is, that resolves any conflict with DK's statement, right? But then you see all these, points of exit that go to various centers. And it's really fascinating to follow this. Okay. The rest of this passage describes this final process of assimilation. Importantly, during the third pass around the pranic triangle, the physical body becomes entirely infused with prana. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Kira.
These emanations find their way finally out of the etheric system by means of surface radiation. The pranic essence escapes from the circumference of its temporary ring pass, not as emanative human prana, which is the same prana as earlier received, plus the peculiar quality that any single individual may convey to it during its transitory circulation. The essence escapes plus individual quality. Here again can be seen the correspondence to the escape of all essence from within any ring pass knot when the cycle has been completed. The matter of the etheric body is of a very practical interest, and when its importance is better realized, men will attend to the distribution of prana within the body with closer attention, and will see that the vitalization of the body via the three centers proceeds unhindered.
Thank you.
I
Yes.
have a question. What is any ring pass knot?
What is a ring pass knot?
Yeah.
Simply said, it's a sphere of influence. So this pranic essence escapes from the circumference of its temporary ring pass knot. So, so for the solar system, that would be that point in space where it no longer has influence, right? For a planet, the same. For us, it's a little more amorphous, but it's there. It's still there. There's a ring pass knot of influence, and because we're talking about prana, it's a very physical thing. We emanate prana, and after we have processed it, we emanate it, and when it at some point it passes beyond our own what you could call sphere of influence or etheric ring pass knot.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I saw Joe's hand.
What I wanted to tell you is that I have been a Navajo loom weaver for many years, and the Navajo Indians always leave a blank in a corner somewhere. You can look for it in their native rugs. It's an escape route like this, which seems to me would allow the energy of the weaving to go into the atmosphere around.
Ah, that's really interesting. I always knew that they put in a flaw on purpose, so because with the
That's
idea
it.
that
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, and I think what your explanation of that is probably more esoteric than the general one, which is that only God is perfect, and so as a human weaver, we put this flaw in to acknowledge that, But this idea of a place where the energy within the weaving can move out into into the world, I like that. That's really interesting.
It
so
just struck me as similar to what was being described. Seems like a good metaphor. I'm not sure, of course.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Can I ask a question? It's Kira.
Yes.
So could that be kind of like like a cell that's permeable
To
a
a
little
what?
bit?
Of a,
Like, you know how a cell is permeable, so you can
oh,
move in
yeah,
and out of a cell?
absolutely. That would be the most microcosmic example of that, and it's literally physically
Mhm.
demonstrates what we're reading about as occurring, pranically. Prana is not
Right,
stopped by a wall of matter, like for
right,
instance, blood is,
right.
uh, and what you're describing is more like that. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
okay,
you.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw Robert's hand. Robert, you got something, Robert?
Yes, the idea of the etheric ring pass knot, I think we can look at that as a kind of etheric skin, an analog to skin of the physical body. That's the ring pass knot, where there's a boundary, and sometimes that can be permeated, but that is the boundary that holds it together, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the most obvious ring pass knot. I think that in the prana, though, goes well beyond that ring pass knot. It is, you say, a pranic skin would be its version of the ring pass knot. In other words, where the pranic emanations are no longer move, where they no longer go beyond. Each of our personal pranic emanation has a certain level to which it moves, right, and no further than that, um, based on our personal ring pass knots.
I think any
I don't
form,
think that's identical to our human skin, though.
no, we're not identical, but there's the analog. I think that every form has a boundary, which is what helps to define that form, whatever material or
That's
immaterial
right.
level. So I think it's interesting to think about, well, what is that? Because we can picture the nadies and the centers, but what would be for the entire etheric body? What would be that holding boundary for the form? And I think that's kind of what he's indicating here.
Yeah, I think you have the form boundary and you have the emanatory boundary, you know, um, and that the emanatory boundary was, you could take a light bulb, for instance, turn it on in the emanatory boundary. At what point are absolutely no light penetrating from that light bulb? That would be its emanatory boundary. The form boundary is the glass of the light bulb. So I
Well, it's
think,
like with the physical skin, there's things are coming through the physical skin, whether it's electromagnetism, whether it's some sort of gaseous thing, whatever it is. And yet, but there are certain points, like you think of the nostrils, where there's openings in that skin where for interior or any of the kind of excretory orifices. So, I mean, it's one way of looking at any form, its limitations, what goes beyond it, what it contains, and I'd probably write a huge book about it.
yeah, you could call it the ring pass knot.
Yeah.
Okay, reader, please. Oh, we just read this, didn't we? Very practical. Yeah, that's right. We read it. So first up, these emanations find their way finally out of the etheric system by means of surface radiation. So we looked at surface radiation a few sessions ago as part of these charts. It's the means by which the life force that originates on cosmic levels finds its way in progressive stages all the way down to an atom of substance, right? And the connecting link is the surface emanation. That's what links us. And it also would seem to be, DK hasn't actually made this statement, but through the examples he gives, it would seem to be that it's the Devic kingdom, different groups of devas that form the intermediate carriers of this surface emanation. There's a kind of yin yang, and of course we know that the human kingdom is positively polarized to the Devic kingdom, for instance. So they act as, you know, an electrically a pole that allows that surface emanation to travel from the highest sources, which are beyond the solar system, into the solar system, all the way down to an atom of matter. It's that surface radiation or emanation that allows this to happen. All right. Okay. Next, a statement about the specific quality that every individual, human or otherwise, adds to the prana it receives. This is an important aspect. We might hypothesize that in addition to adding individual coloration, human prana is also vibrationally stepped down so that it can be received by the group of devas who are nourished by human prana. So that which is added, you know, if we go back up here to the top, it's that coloration which is added to the prana received by the sun, which is cosmic prana, that allows it to be reflected onto a planet by solar devas, also to the human kingdom. This would seem to be a special relationship here, right? And that planetary prana is also processed and sent by that planetary prana is also the source of what planetary devas receive, rather than of what the sun or solar devas receive. There is always this intermediate step involved, right? And so, but in the case of the human kingdom, and I think that has to do with the three logi that the human and Devic kingdoms, the higher Devic kingdoms, have access to the energy of, that it's described in the earlier chart. The human kingdoms is unique in that it is able to receive directly from the solar devas and not just from the planetaries. But otherwise, at least in the examples that he's given, it's always from the immediate step above that the prana is received from, and the immediate step below that the prana is emanated to. All right. Okay, let's see here. So next, sometimes it takes me a minute to find my place here. Here again can be seen the correspondence to the escape of all essences from within any ring past naught when the cycle has been completed. So surface emanation is the final stage in the cycle of reception, absorption, and emanation, a cycle that is common to kingdoms of nature and the Devic kingdom at all stages of consciousness, right? As shown here, from the solar logos to an atom of substance. DK here defines this final emanation as, quote, the escape of all essences from within any ring past not. That's what emanation means. Meaning that all prana not absorbed by that unit of consciousness is passed down to the next level. And finally, this matter of the etheric body is of a very practical interest, and when its importance is better realized, men will attend to the distribution of prana within the body with closer attention and will see that the vitalization of the body via the three centers proceeds unhindered. The etheric body is of practical interest because it directly impacts our health, right? And the health of all sentient beings. Just how we might better attend, quote unquote, to the distribution of prana within the body is not given, except DK does tell us earlier in the text, and he tells us again a little bit, that we should expose the pranic triangle to sunlight, right? And yet he also tells us that until we know and the laws that allow us to repel too much prana, that we can get too much prana. So there's a balance there that we need to discover. But, you know, in this, he also seems to be hinting that there exists yogic practices that could increase our pranic reception and assimilation. For instance, he doesn't talk anything about the breath here, pranayama, which is the assimilation or bringing in of prana through the breath. And that is an age-old practice in the East. And next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, just before we do, I think Robert has another question, or
Yo.
no, he just lowered his hand. So
Okay. Next up.
Maria Christina.
Maria Christina, are you there?
Yes, yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Great, welcome. Could you read for us?
Thank you. The subject has necessarily to be handled in a superficial manner, and only outlines and scattered hints can be given, as we've noted. Nevertheless, it will be found that if this teaching is studied with care, it will convey a knowledge of truths whose caliber and content will prove invaluable, and of a kind hitherto not given out. The place of the etheric sheath as a separator or ring pass knot, and its functions as a receiver and distributor of prana are dealt with here in a larger sense than heretofore, and the subject may later be enlarged.
Thank you, Maria Christina. Okay, first up, the subject has necessarily to be handled in a superficial manner, and only outlines and scattered hints can be given. DK here hints at the vastness of the occult science of prana, which we get a glimpse of in A.E. Powell's book, right? The Etheric Double. I can imagine that in the not so distant future, this will become a branch of medical science. You know, when etheric vision starts coming in, it's going to be a game changer, and prana will be one of the main fields of study because it's so, as he says, it has such practical application. Yeah, and there'll be practitioners specializing in pranic reception and assimilation. Next up, nevertheless, it will be found that if this teaching is studied with care, it will convey a knowledge of truths whose caliber and content will prove invaluable and of a kind hitherto not given out. This sentence is a kind of extended ponder on this, referencing all that DK has written on the subject. So, studying a compilation of prana on prana and the etheric body, and you could create one pretty quickly through a word search of all DK's books, by an esoterically inclined health professional might help to usher in some real advances in this discipline. But ultimately, it's going to depend on etheric vision, because that's where the work can truly be checked. Finally, the place of the etheric sheath as a separator or ring pass knot and its functions as a receiver and distributor of prana are dealt with here in a larger sense than heretofore, and the subject may be later enlarged. So we're here reminded that the etheric body not only assimilates prana, but also acts to separate the physical from the astral vehicle, as well as providing a series of protective webs between the chakras. TCF was written in 1925. DK here hints that more on the subject will follow. True to his prediction, most of the blue books give additional info on both the etheric body and prana. And next up, we have the last paragraph of this section. Can we get a reader, please?
Maria Michaelis. Okie dokie.
Two fundamental truths stand out from the aggregate of facts so slightly dealt with here. First, the fourth etheric subplane of the physical plane is the immediate concern of A, man, the microcosm, B, the heavenly man, the planetary logos, C, the grand man of the heavens, the solar logos. Second, in this fourth chain and fourth round, the fourth ether is beginning to be studied and viewed as a separating web. It permits occasional exit to those of suitable vibration.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, this first of the two fundamental truths here listed reads, quote, the fourth etheric subplane of the physical plane is the immediate concern of, and then he gives the three: man, heavenly man, and the solar logos, or grand man of the heavens. The second fundamental truth that he gives tells us why the fourth ether is, quote unquote, of immediate concern. In this fourth chain and fourth round, the fourth ether is beginning to be studied and viewed as a separating web. It permits occasional exit to those of suitable vibration. Okay, this is an entirely new topic here. This statement introduces a subject, the importance of the fourth ether, that DK explores extensively throughout the rest of TCF. You may remember from our last session a quote from TCF stating that the reason the animal kingdom is able to transfer into the human kingdom is because the animal group soul is found on the fourth subplane of the astral plane. So, we didn't get at that time when we were reading this, that this ties right into the importance of the fourth etheric. So let's take a look at two additional passages on the importance of the fourth etheric subplane. Could we get a reader, please?
Marianne or Marianne.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. The fourth etheric plane holds the key to the dominance of matter, and it might be noted that on the fourth physical ether, man begins to coordinate his astral or emotional body and to escape at ever more frequent intervals into the vehicle. Continuity of consciousness is achieved when a man has mastered the four ethers. On the fourth subplane of the mental plane, man begins to control his causal or egoic body and to polarize his consciousness therein until the polarization is complete. He functions then consciously on it when he has mastered the correspondence to the ethers on the mental plane. On the Buddhic plane, the fourth cosmic ether, the heavenly man, or the grouped consciousness of the human and deva monads, begin to function and to escape eventually from the cosmic etheric planes. When these three cosmic ethers are mastered, the functioning is perfected. Polarization is centered in the monadic vehicles, and the seven heavenly men have achieved their goal.
Thank you. So a special note is how DK defines a heavenly man as the grouped consciousness of the human and Devic monads. And can we get a reader for this next quote on the fourth ether?
Yeah, Miri, you want to read?
Yes. The fourth ether, which is even now being what we might call discovered, is at this stage characterized by certain things. I might enumerate a few of these facts with exceeding brevity as follows. A. It is the ether which the violet ray uses as a medium. B. The fourth ether is that whereof the majority of the etheric bodies of man are made. C. The fourth ether is largely the principal sphere of influence of the devas of the shadows, or those violet devas which are closely concerned with the physical evolution of man. D. It is the etheric sphere within which, at a little later date, the human and the deva evolutions will touch. E. From this fourth etheric sphere, the dense physical bodies are created. F. It is the sphere of physical individualization. Only when the animal to be individualized was fully conscious on that subplane of the physical plane was it possible to coordinate the corresponding spheres on the astral and mental planes, and by means of this triple coordination to effect the necessary steps which enable the quaternary to succeed in its effort to approximate the triad. G. This fourth ether is in this fourth round and on this fourth chain has to be completely mastered and controlled by the human hierarchy, the fourth creative. Every unit of the human family has to attain this mastery before the end of this round. H. It is the sphere wherein the initiations of the threshold are undergone, and the fivefold initiations of the physical plane are entered up.
Thank you. So you can see there's a whole webinar's worth of material here in these 2 pages of quotes. And, you know, we'll get there eventually and consider these in detail. But it's a deep subject, but at least at this point we get a taste for the importance of the fourth etheric that DK just alludes to in passing. Okay, this brings us to the third section called the transmitter of prana. Can we get a reader for this passage?
Nasa.
The transmitter of prana. We have touched but little on the subject of the fire, the purpose of the etheric body being to convey it and distribute it to all parts of the system, its system. We have dwelt on facts which might stimulate interest and emphasize the utility of this pranic vehicle. Certain facts need emphasis and consideration as we study this static ring and its circulating fires. Let me briefly recapitulate for the sake of clarity. The system receives prana from cosmic sources via 3 centers and redistributes it to all parts of its extended influence or to the bounds of the solar etheric web. This cosmic prana becomes colored by solar quality and reaches the furthest confines of the system. Its mission might be described as the vitalization of the vehicle, which is the physical material expression of the solar logos.
Thank you. Okay, first up we have touched but little on the subject of the fire, the purpose of the etheric body being to convey it, fire, and distribute it to all parts of its system. Though fire is not often mentioned in the body of this text on prana, at least not so far, DK did give us this passage from the end of the last chapter listing 26 separate and distinct functions of fire. Next we have, and it's easy to forget that prana is in a fluid from one point of view, especially when considered in how it interacts with the etheric body, because it flows through like a fluid, and yet it is, seems like an oxymoron, but it is also fiery in its effect, right? And that's part of its vitalization. That's what allows it to be a vitalizing factor. Okay, next we have dwelt on facts which might stimulate interest and emphasize the utility of this pranic vehicle. Certain facts need emphasis and consideration as we study this static ring and its circulating fires. DK here calls the etheric body a static ring, thus confirming that it doesn't rotate as do the etheric bodies of solar and planetary logi, as well as an atom of substance also rotates, right? But we're in this unique situation, these kingdoms of nature, the lower kingdoms of nature, including our own, are non-rotational, even though we're made up of lesser lives that do rotate, such as atoms of substance. Next, let me briefly recapitulate for the sake of clarity. The system receives prana from cosmic sources via 3 centers and redistributes it to all parts of its extended influence or to the bounds of the solar etheric web. So, like a human being, a solar system has a receptive pranic triangle. Since the 7 sacred planets make up the chakras of the solar logos, it seems possible that this quote unquote triangle is made up of 3 lesser planets, possibly comets, possibly unseen planets, that make up this pranic triangle, since they also are centers of force, just as are the centers that are represented by the main planets. Next, this cosmic prana becomes colored by solar quality and reaches the furthest confines of the system. So when the solar logos adds its own quality, it transforms, and in the process steps down, cosmic prana into solar prana. It seems likely that part of this solar coloration is the indigo energy of the second ray. And we can bet that the quote unquote furthest confines of the solar system extend well beyond the orbit of Pluto, possibly even out to what astronomers call the Oort cloud, right? That's the furthest known extension of our physical solar system at this point. So what's the boundaries of the pranic system? You know, it's an open question. And then finally, its mission might be described as the vitalization of the vehicle, which is the physical material expression of the solar logos. This brings up a question. Is the effect of prana related to proximity? Is the effect of solar prana less strong on the outer planets than on the inner? Is prana even used by the more abstracted forms of the humanities of the outer planets? I mean, obviously, prana is part of the vitalization because he says so right here. But you can imagine, since he's made it very clear that, exposing oneself to solar rays is essential for the reception of prana, then, what about those beings who exist on the outer planets where the fraction of, it's literally a tiny fraction of the sunlight that we get here? Another open question, right? I see my hand up. Yeah, Robert.
On the page we just left, where it has that that odd phrase.
Ort?
No, the text. Where it's an odd phrase as we study this static ring. I think it might mean that anything that has a ring past naught is itself a ring. And so he's talking about the circulating of the fires that are going on, but the ring itself is a static container. In other words, the etheric body is a body, as static, as solid as any other body. I think that might be what's being implied in that phrase.
That's interesting. So you're interpreting the term static to mean specific and non-variable.
Stable.
Yeah, stable, as opposed to non-rotating, which is that's interesting. Yeah, I think that's a totally valid possibility. That's what he's talking about.
Thank you.
Okay, could we get a reader, please? Oh, that sparked some interest. We got a couple of raised hands. Mikhail, could you choose?
Hi.
Hi, Kira.
Yes. Can I see the picture where you had it had the functions of fire?
Functions of fire.
Picture.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Functions of fire. There was a picture.
Yeah.
Going way back.
That wasn't that far back. It wasn't that far back. We just did it like about 2 pictures ago.
I know.
Do you mean the one that just had the text of the fire?
Yes.
Yeah, it was text. It wasn't an image.
It wasn't in it. Yeah, it was just a text. It was a text picture. Yeah, it was only like 2 pictures ago.
Okay. This is where we are now. I'm just going to go back and you stop me.
Yeah.
We get there. Hold on a sec. Let me get into play mode again.
It was only like 2 pictures ago.
Okay. I'm going back here. Then I'm going back here.
Yeah.
Just tell me when.
Go ahead. Here it is right here.
Yeah.
There we go. I just wanted to see that again. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're very
I just
welcome.
wanted to, yeah, I wanted to see that
Yeah.
because I was aware I missed a class and I didn't see that, and you had flashed on it. It went so quickly I didn't get to see what it had said. Thank you.
And indeed, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, this is one of the most evocative paragraphs in TCF. This paragraph on fire is really extraordinary. Yeah. Okay.
So
I don't
yeah,
mind.
thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else have their hand up? All right. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Robert.
The planet receives prana from the solar center and redistributes it via the 3 receiving centers to all parts of its sphere of influence. This solar prana becomes colored by the planetary quality and is absorbed by all evolutions found within the planetary ring past Nut. Its mission might be described as the vitalization of the vehicle, which is the physical material expression of one or other of the 7 heavenly men.
Thank you, Robert. So first up, the planet receives prana from the solar center and redistributes it via the 3 receiving centers to all parts of its sphere. Again, the pranic triangle for reception, its sphere of influence would include all its kingdoms of nature, including the Devic. And we earlier learned that 2 of these centers of reception are associated with the planetary axis. This was way back at the beginning of this section on prana. And that the location of the 3rd pranic center is kept secret, possibly to be revealed through initiation. It's often alluded to in ancient texts, like the Garden of Eden is thought to be a reference to the esoteric 3rd pranic center, right? And then next, this solar prana becomes colored by the planetary quality and is absorbed by all evolutions found within the ring past Nut. Again, we might speculate that the color and quality of a planet includes its ray makeup. It might also include its level of consciousness, and that consciousness conditions its pranic emanation. That would be determined by what cosmic initiation the planet has taken, for instance. So question, does the planetary splenic center, which determines the optimal amount of prana to be assimilated by the planet, adjust that amount as a result of the ill health that must be being generated through pollution and global warming? In other words, just like a person gets sick, if you have large swaths of its kingdoms of nature dying off, and global warming and pollution, is there also a downward adjustment of the amount of prana that's being received by the planet? It's just an open question. And what effects would that have? What effects would such a reduction of prana being received by the planet have on its kingdoms in nature? It's a pretty abstract question, but important. And next, its mission might be described as the vitalization of the vehicle, which is the physical material expression of one or other of the 7 heavenly men. In this, DK restates the universal purpose for the reception of prana by all units of consciousness in all kingdoms of nature within the ring past Nut of a particular planet, right? Next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Maria Christina just put something comment. I'll say that first. So It says, she says in the Agni Yoga books, pine trees are another recommended source of prana, accumulating solar prana and releasing it. One of a few references are pines from letters of Helena Roerich. 1. The emanations of pine trees are, of course, irreplaceable. Pine trees, like electric machines, accumulate vital forces, a condensed supply of prana, or Nature of Valoris. The Druids considered a chalice of pine essence as a chalice of life. It is always beneficial to have in rooms small pine trees or to spray the pine essence. In this way, the atmosphere is purified and the undesirable entities which are so numerous around the human emanations are driven away.
Wow, that's a great quote. Was that Maria Christina that said that? They gave us that?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that. Remember in the last webinar, we talked about how the vegetable kingdom as a whole acts as like a Deva kingdom, acts as the receiver and distributor of prana on this planet. And throughout the solar system, he talks about the vegetable kingdom as being the prime transmitter of prana for the planet. And that, of course, within the vegetable kingdom, there are going to be those vegetable entities, if you will, like the great pine trees, that are most potent in that work. So I'm and of course, as we burn down the forests in the Amazon and cut them down everywhere else, it's got to have an effect. It's got to be, and it's not the obvious physical effect. It's going to be probably an even more important vivifying effect that we lose through that. So thank you for that. Okay, do we read this?
No.
We didn't read that. Thank you. That's right. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, I'll just say Agni Yoga, from Tia, Agni Yoga also describes pine needles as collectors of electricity, sleep beneath the pines, and then Joe says the pine cone is said to be shaped as is the pineal gland.
Right, I have heard that, and interesting that pine and pineal are so close, as though they're derivative of some common root. Yeah, I myself live in a pine forest, and it's one of the main reasons that I moved here. Okay, can we get a reader?
Yes. Tia.
The microcosm receives prana from the sun after it has permeated the planetary etheric vehicle, so that it is a solar prana plus planetary quality. Each planet is the embodiment of some one ray aspect, and its quality is marked predominantly on all its evolution. Prana, therefore, which is active radiatory heat, varies in vibration and quality according to the receiving entity. Man passes the prana through his etheric vehicle, colors it and with his own peculiar quality, and so transmits it to the lesser lives that make up his little system. Thus the great interaction goes on, and all parts blend, merge, and are interdependent, and all parts receive color, qualify, and transmit.
Quality. Right.
Quality.
Color, quality. Oh, no, you're right. I'm sorry. My bad. All parts receive. It's all verbs, not all nouns. All parts receive, color, qualify, and transmit. Right. Thank you very much.
I'm going to spray you with some pine scent, Francis.
Thank you. I can do that. Okay, first, the microcosm receives prana from the sun after it has permeated the planetary etheric vehicle, so that it is solar prana plus planetary quality. by now we're starting to get a pretty good idea of how the pranic system of reception, assimilation, and distribution works. Here, DK stresses that all the prana in our system comes to us from the sun, and that the receiving entity colors the received prana with its own energy. What's not made clear is whether the lesser kingdoms in nature receive solar prana directly, or whether they receive it as planetary prana through the agency of planetary prana. We know that human beings receive both. See, it says here, after it has permeated the planetary etheric vehicle. And that suggests that what's being talked about here is planetary prana, right? Next, each planet is the embodiment of some one ray aspect. First mention of rays in correlation with this prana. And its quality is marked predominantly on all its evolutions. So the rays of a planet, or at least in part, responsible for the coloration of what becomes planetary prana. We might hypothesize that the personality ray of the planet, being allied with the third principle, would be the primary colorant of a planet's prana. For us on Earth, this would be the third ray of active intelligence. Next, prana, therefore, which is active radiatory heat, varies in vibration and quality according to the receiving entity. Another universal statement applying to all levels from a solar logos to an atom of substance. We might here ask, do the solar and planetary devas also add their own coloration when transmitting prana to the human kingdom, or do they purely transmit and step down the prana they receive? MDR notes that, quote, a succinct definition of prana is given, active radiatory heat. This reminds us it's all part of that third aspect of fire, fire by friction. Whenever there's heat involved, that's what you're looking at. And next, man passes the prana through his etheric vehicle, colors it with his own peculiar quality, and so transmits it to the lesser lives that make up his little system. Earlier, DK stated that these lesser lives were a specific group of devas, quote, of a more pronounced hue than even lesser devas. And after due assimilation of the human radiation, they transmit it principally to the animal kingdom. This might lead us to hypothesize that there is a Devic intermediary between each and every kingdom in nature. And finally, we're running out of time here. Thus, the great interaction goes on, and all parts blend, merge, and are interdependent. And all parts receive, color, qualify, and transmit. DK again underscores the interdependence of all manifestation. It's interesting that he separates the verbs color and qualify as separate stages in the assimilation process. Just what does that mean? You know, we normally think of them as coloring, as qualifying, but here he doesn't expand on this, but it's interesting that he does that. Also, keep in mind that every single person who brings etheric, who brings prana in through its own system, her own system, that what then that person emanates is unique to that person. just that it's unique to a planet, for instance. So, you got 9 billion people walking around, you have 9 billion different specific qualities of prana that's being emanated and absorbed by this lesser kingdom of devas. Okay, any final thoughts or questions? We'll start here next time.